As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Welcome to SUPfm, the sport's leading podcast, where we speak to inspiring people from the fastest growing water sport in the world. Our aim is to help you maximise your own experiences of stand-up paddleboarding and to deepen your love of the water as we chat with people from both inside and outside the SUP world. Every episode is designed to inspire, support and provide you with a deeper immersion through my conversations with leading athletes, scientists, adventurers, TED speakers and New York Times best-selling authors. If you like what we do, there are plenty of ways to support the podcast, including telling your friends, following us on social media. You can even buy me a coffee on Patreon, or you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, which will help others to find us. Whatever you can do, we appreciate it. This episode is part of our Yukon 1000 mini-season, where we do a deep dive over several episodes into the ultimate adventure race challenge and the longest paddle race on the planet, where we'll talk to the race organisers, teams and individual paddlers in the lead up, in the start town, just ahead of the race and after the finishing line, closely following what many describe as a truly epic odyssey of a race. In this episode, you'll hear more from the race organisers, some updates direct from Whitehorse, and part of my interview with the legendary ultra-distance SUP athlete Bart De Zwart, where we discussed his own experiences racing the Yukon 1000. If you're listening to this episode at any point near to the date of its release, the race has now started in full, and all the teams, the SUP teams who I spoke to in the previous episode, and the kayak and canoeing teams are all on their way 1,000 miles down the Yukon. And if the race is still on, that means that you can still track the teams as they progress. And the link to the tracker is in the show notes. If you do happen to be listening to us after the race has finished, you can still catch up on the final race positions on the Yukon 1000 website, which is yukon1000.org. So that's Yukon and then the numbers 1000.org. And after all this coverage, you may well be thinking about entering and graduating with the 2024 Yukon 1000 intake. And that opportunity to join this select group descending the Yukon will be opening very shortly. So as you'll know, if you've been listening to the other episodes, this race is a technology restricted zone. So in terms of communication on the water, there are no selfies available as you go through the 5 Finger Rapids. All tech goes into a sealed Ziploc bag at the starting line and is opened again at the finishing line. So all we can tell you about the teams when they're on the water is what we can see from their trackers. That is until they get to the Dalton Highway Bridge in Alaska, which is, of course, the finishing point of their journey. So it's pretty exciting for us because we'll be concentrating on sharing any news and updates from the race on Instagram, Threads or our email newsletter, but we're not going to get anything back from teams until they've safely crossed the finishing line. So the next episode to this one will be released when everything is done and dusted, and so there might be an episode gap of a week or so. So let's kick off this episode by hearing again from John Frith, the race director, in a part of our chat you won't have heard so far, as we talk in more detail about the structure of the race, including the experience of the paddlers, what they and the organisers are doing in the start town of Whitehorse, and then a dive into what the key stages of the race look like for them as they head down the mighty Yukon. Right, so let's just take the listeners through journey. They arrive in Whitehorse, where the race starts. It's a low-key start, but there's going to be a bit of tension ahead of the start. So what do your days and what do their days look like leading up to the start?
So they'll run into the place 24 hours before the race starts, and the previous 24 hours they'll have a race brief off me in downtown in Whitehorse at the stern wheeler in the conference room there, and I'll give a brief, and then I'll give them 3 or 4 hours, and then over in the park we'll do a full kit check, to their satellite comms, their spot tracker, and then right down to their kit and their mapping. And that's again, some teams don't read that right. I'm pretty rigid with that. It's my insurance policy, it's their insurance policy. I've got no issues of pulling teams out at that stage, and a couple of teams I have to make them re-show that night and give them the warning that you ain't on tomorrow until it's sorted. And then they'll do what they do that night, get their head down, sort their admin out, and then the next morning I'll say, listen, at 07:30, be here. I'm going to say stand by, go. If you're late, you ain't on. So don't be late. And so meet them the next morning, 07:30. We have a little ritual. I sort of do a First Nation blessing down by the river. I read a little poem about the river, and then I give them a standby and go, and off they go. The stand-up paddle boards are 24 hours ahead, and really the only reason why this is done, I know other races do this, is because of the lake, really, to just get them across that lake. I've been across that lake a few times, and it could stop the race before it's even started the race, really. So we've been pretty lucky, but get everybody across that lake, and then they're heading towards sort of Carmax is the next stop, really. Across Lake Lebarge and towards Carmax into the Yukon proper.
So Lake Lebarge, you mentioned it there. It's about 30 miles long, I think. It's also hugely exposed. And as you've said, if the weather conditions aren't right, then it's a real problem, particularly for stand-up paddle boarders, because there's a bigger sort of profile there. So what's the deal with the weather there? Is there a prevailing wind direction? I know that there's been a tailwind before there, but or it might just be random.
35 miles. And the problem is when you get onto the river, depending how much water flow is in the river. I mean, I've gone in there and I've not been able to get onto the lake, and have to pull my boat over the river. So over the river into the lake. So you've got to get onto it. And the first couple of Ks, or first 10 to 15 Ks, are like low water. It's really low, like sandbar, where that water's all that sediment's being pushed into the lake. Then you're going to go right across the lake to the east side, and then you're going to stay 200 meters off the east side all the way up until you enter to the mouth of the Yukon. So you're right, as you say, it can be perfect like glass, and then you can get halfway and there's waves, big old waves coming behind, and you don't know why they're there, but it's such a big lake. At the other end there's a storm, but you're just not seeing it. There's a slight bend to it, and then you're going to kink right, and then you're going to head towards the river entrance. And like you say, because you're in the wilderness, because it's not been really that sort of chopped into by man, or no one lives up there, you don't see the entrance to the river until you're like maybe 150 meters away, until the natural flow of it. You just can't see this great big river. You're just looking at a wall of pine and nothing else. You start to doubt whether it's even there. But that's the great thing. And you've got the tree lines pretty low and then goes high, and that's really because stuff hasn't still grown back since the paddle steamers. They cut those trees down 100 years ago to get all the paddle steamers up and down. But such as the winters, that those trees haven't really still grown back yet. It's such a slow growth path for them to get back to full height. So it's all pretty low, and then it's sort of K back. It's all pretty dense and hard going.
And then we've got Five Finger Rapids, and that's a pretty spectacular location. And as you said, sort of depending on the water flow, that can be quite exciting. This year, I think there's been quite a lot of water down there, hasn't there? I think there's been some flooding. So I guess you've got your eyes on that at the moment, but you're not going to be carrying your boats around, are you, this year, it looks like?
No, and there was a time last year we considered it, portaging the boats around and throwing them in just beyond it, but I won't. I'll try my best not to do that. I'd rather take the jet boat up there and sit off and let them hope for the best that they get through. So as you say, they'll go through Carmax first, and that's the only bridge that will come under. And that's a little boost for them. There's nothing there, but it's a civilization, their first sign of civilization since they've left, Whitehorse, the first time anything man-made. And so they'll go through there, and like you say, another 20, 30 Ks on, they're going to hit Five Finger Rapids. And Five Finger Rapids tends to be hammed up a wee bit. I've certainly gone through there holding a brew before to going through, and it's been pretty rough. But there's little things like beyond it, there's a set of rapids called the Rink Rapids that everybody doesn't talk about and everybody forgets. But actually last year they were worse than the Five Finger, but there was a little slip through on the right that you could get through, sort of filtered out on the right. So it's a great. I'm glad they're there because they get the blood going, and they get everybody. It's a good little stopgap where you sort of that day you're like, have we got our stuff tied down? And is our admin squared away? Is the boats tied down? Is spare paddles tied down? Is the bare barreled? It sort of makes teams switch on a wee bit. So even if it wasn't there, it's great that it is there, and they'll get through there, and that'll give them a little buzz because that's a real big hurdle that they'll go. That wasn't so bad. Blood going for the rest of the day, and they know that. It's also a physical landmark. Any doubts of navigation where you are, you know where you are now. You've just gone through Five Finger Rapids. You know that Dawson City is just under halfway, and you're in the race proper. So you tend to get teams when they get there, they're pretty up for it from there on in. They know there's a bit of self-confidence built. They've had 3 nights in the bush. They're starting to get the game plan together. Yeah, it serves as a barrier for many things.
And then you come through to the next key landmark, which is Dawson City, and Dawson City, that was the centre of the Klondike, wasn't it? So it used to be absolutely enormous. But I guess that's a point where you look over the competitors coming through, just check they're in decent state. Would that be right?
Yeah. So sort of the last 100 miles before Dawson, the river's quite braided and quite untidy. And so it's probably the first time you've got to start looking at a map proper and navigating your way through the main currents if you're serious about it. And if it's flooded, it can be pretty rough. Also, you've got the White River comes into it before that. And so your water is no longer beautiful and clear. It's now ash filtered. It's going to play on your administration, play on your water filtration. All that, again, has got to be working well. Otherwise, you're going to start suffering. So lots of new stuff that's been introduced. And you've got to get to Dawson City. That's the obvious landmark. As you said, Dawson City, in the late 1800s was 10,000 people. Now it's, in the Windsor, it's probably about 300 people tops. And it was at the start of COVID, this quirky little trendy town up north. I think since COVID, it's struggling a wee bit and sort of gone back a wee bit. And it's struggling, but it's a cool physical landmark, but it is still really in the wild. An example of that is, last year, just coming through there as a race organizer, I was cut off getting in and out because of bushfires. It took everything out, the power lines, it took them off the grid. And so just operating from a land perspective, let alone being on the water, it's just as challenging terrain. But like you say, I introduced that for twofold into the race, the check there. One, to make people that were on a jolly get out. Yeah. Clearly identify them at this stage and pull them out, to keep it a race, to keep it true to what its title is. And the third one is, the second point is really going back to what I said at the start. The psychology of being that remote, it will affect people, and it does affect people. And they don't know on the race that a K behind them is a team and a K in front around the next bend of the river is a team. Yeah. They don't see that. They think they're on the moon. And some of them have not seen, some of them get out and they have not seen a single team the whole way, for 7 days, or a single person. And so that gets, some people relish that and thrive in that, but some people struggle with it. And also that, digital detox is a real thing. Some people it bites at, not being disconnected and not being able to talk to their family or Google the way out of a problem whenever they want. All that's removed. And so I just have that visual check to check that everyone's all right. And if I've got doubts, I'll, as I warn teams off, I'll pull you out at that stage. Some teams have had fights, and it hasn't gone well. Yeah. And that was evident last year, and they'll pull out. And they're just like, this, we're not working as a team. We're not the right pair. Yeah. And that's fine. That's fine. That's the place to do it, because beyond that, we're just not getting you out. So it serves as that purpose. So Dawson City is that. So unfortunately, it's a super cool place they don't really get to see. They just tank past. Yeah. They don't really get to see it. So, but that's the race, and that keeps them unsupported.
And then you move on to the point where you pass into Alaska, and there's a village called Eagle, which I think serves as the border post there. I presume that you haven't got a guy in a booth checking passports backwards and forwards. What's the drill there?
They did have the guy checking passports, but he perished in the ice melt. So they got rid of that. So they get out there, and there's a sort of building there, and behind it is a permanent phone box,
right?
That's linked to the Beaver Creek border crossing, and so 24-hour sat phone. They just ring up, they just check in where they are, and then they get back in the boats and they go again. There's nothing else there really anyway for them to do, and they're gone again. It's kind of nice to get out and stretch your legs for 100 yards, get back in your boat, and go. But again, last year was a real challenge because there was a log jam there. The river was moving particularly fast. It was really high. We're struggling to get out. So it serves a couple of things for me. They've obviously got to cross. It's crossing into another country. And they've got to do it. And the Americans, more than most, are pretty serious about their borders.
Yep.
They've got to do that. And also I can ring those guys and just check up on, are we all good? And they're all through. And I can see them on the tracker anyway, but and they'll get through. So they'll not really hang about in there, and they're off again, heading down the river, and that's them into Alaska. I mean, they'll cross the border anyway and see the US flag flying randomly on the shoreline. That's quite random.
That's the point.
So just there, yeah.
And then the area which is quite fascinating after all of these fantastic pine woods and beautiful canyons is the flats, which is all meandering. And I guess navigation is key wherever you are, but that would be a place where I guess the river changes to quite a large degree from a year to year.
Yeah, it is a game-changing place, and last year that really showed on the race as well. Teams that were just there, popped out right up front. Teams that, if you haven't got your ducks in a row at this stage, if you haven't done your due diligence on your mapping, your waypoints, whatever you've zoomed in on and produced and printed, and you're not looking at them, or you haven't been looking at your maps previously to build that navigational confidence, then it's going to come unstuck at this stage because the water is dissipated over a large area. And it is thousands of little islands and log jams and currents and channels, and trying to stay in that deep water main current channel of the river is really, really hard to do. It shifts. That's the problem. It shifts. You can only go off the last imagery that's taken from space, right? And then that depends on how much water was in there, depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And then you've got the ice melt that happened in May. So what did that do to the place? You just don't know. So, and literally on the race, people going down there are some of the people going down there for the first time that year.
Yeah.
So that are looking through it. So that are pushing their way through it. So you're taking on the unknown, and you won't see anybody there. It looks like a war zone as well. It's just trees piled up. It's just ruined the place. I remember when I went through for the first time, the water was really high over a lot of these. So I was like paddling through a pine forest and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, can this be right? Really doubting all your navigational skills and abilities. But, I just knew that the water wasn't lying. It was pulling me downhill towards sea.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that I took comfort in. But what you don't want to do is take one of the side tribs that is going to take you into a beaver dam or take you inland further and off your track. So the real fear is that you can miss a day. I think the year I did, there's a couple of chaps in the Royal Marines, great blokes, and they'd done that. They took a trib that took them inland. They lost a day of the race essentially. So there are many risks, and then ultimately the risks are that it's just a dangerous place that trying to get you out there, if it goes south, it's probably not going to happen. It's a big challenge. So it's a real wake up call. And like we were saying before, when you get there, you're there now 4 or 5 days without much sleep. You're fatigued, you're tired, you're worn out, you're losing weight. Your nutrition game is, no matter what you're doing, you're burning sort of 7,000-8,000 calories a day. You're not filling that back up. So it's starting to burn now. So there's a lot going on, and you've got to be at your highest alert and switched on and working functionally as a pair really well. So for me, that's the win and the loss place, the flats.
And then you get through to the finishing post, Dalton Highway Bridge. I happen to know that there aren't any brass bands or big events and celebrations going on there. It's all sort of pretty low key. But as you say, you get there, job done. You mentioned about nutrition and so on. I understand one guy lost about 7 kilos during his journey down there. I mean, that's quite some extreme weight loss, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at that. Yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, so we get them out at the end. We'll see them coming down. We'll get them at the end. We do a little thing. I bring a pale ale up from Whitehorse called Yukon Gold. Give them one of them. I give them I do a bit of a military gesture. Give them this thing called a coin. They put it in their pocket. They look at it later on. It's an old Roman thing. When they're on their own, and then really just send them off up to this place where they make these burgers out of like a cow. It's pretty special. It's like proper. Pretty, like 4,000 calorie burger and chips.
Fantastic.
Getting them in there, getting them fed, getting them their head down, and the next available transport, I just get them out of there because there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
And there's no point hanging around. So people want to hang around for the teams coming through, but the best thing for them is just get them out of there. When I can fill up a bus, just ship them out.
Yeah. Because
we're now talking days apart.
Yeah.
In their sort of groups. Get them out there, send them back to Fairbanks where they just get them in a hotel where they just want to sleep.
Right.
Eat as many calories as they can, sleep again, and then get on a plane and go home.
Amazing.
So it's a pretty low key finish, but it's a really tight community even past after the race. Everybody keeps in contact. Yeah. I regularly see people that have done the race that are over visiting other people.
Yeah.
And then the great little stories is that stuff that materializes after the race that you didn't know about people, what they were dealing with in the backgrounds, like the Finding Ben story. I don't know if you've seen that about the guy from New Zealand who'd had a serious brain injury. You don't know this stuff, and then they sort of it's like being a Catholic priest at the end as the race director. They climb up the beach and tell you all these stuff that and so whether it be that they're not well or they've seen as last year they saw Bigfoot, a team.
Yeah,
saw Bigfoot.
I saw that report. Yeah. Well, they've had a lot of time to be in their own heads, haven't they? I mean, it's like a perfect Buddhist meditation with a bit more pain, possibly, but yeah, and the I guess the hallucinations can make it a bit more complex as well.
Yeah. I definitely saw a gorilla once. Sat there on the beach looking at me, but I think it was a log.
Well, but I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. We'd like to thank Baltic Life Jackets for returning as episode sponsors this season. Baltic designed and developed their SUP Elite PFDs to solve two key problems facing stand-up paddlers. The slimmed-down front panel makes it easier to climb back on your board, and the ergonomic cutaways around the arms accommodate the SUP stroke, allowing you to paddle freely without restriction to the point that you hardly notice you're even wearing it. The SUP Elite also incorporates storage and the option to add a hydration pack, which is perfect for the summer. So check out the SUP Elite and the SUP Pro PFDs at your local stockist or at supfmpodcast.com/Baltic. Looking to take your performance to the next level? Then look no further than Ocean Pacific. Introducing the Strike Series VRX, the ultimate SUP paddle designed for maximum power and efficiency. Its firm flex shaft optimizes energy transfer for efficient paddling. Its double dihedral blade ensures an unrivaled grip on the water, boosting your surfing, racing and touring performance. Ocean Pacific sponsors and promotes UK surf and race culture, supporting athletes and adventure racing teams, including the Shac team competing in this year's Yukon 1000, and they're committed to providing professional grade equipment at an accessible price. Visit oceanpacific.com today to explore their range of high performance paddles, hardware and apparel, and the links to all of our sponsors are in the show notes. So now just put yourself in the place of those paddlers waiting for the starting gun to sound. When you arrived in Whitehorse International Airport, you could see already from the air as you flew in the mountains and the river and the remoteness of the terrain. And now you've got 2 days to think, maybe sitting by the river, maybe checking your kit for the 100th time, or just sitting with your thoughts ahead of the longest paddle race in the world. How would you be feeling at that point? Well, if you're Craig Sawyer from Team Shac, the answer would be pretty positive, actually. And earlier this week, Craig sent me this update.
Craig here from Team Shac, racing on the Yukon 1000 2023 on stand-up paddleboards. It's now Thursday lunchtime here in Whitehorse, 12:30. We've just finished our race briefing as a SUP team. Or as a SUP teams. It looks like there were originally 4 SUP teams set to race this year, and it looks like we've got 2 no-shows. The Australians and the Americans, for whatever reason, are not here. Dropouts happen every year on this race beforehand. It could be illness, it could be injury, change of heart, change of mind. But for whatever reason, it's going to be 2 SUP teams, and both of those from the UK. So I guess we're guaranteed at least first or second. Being an optimist and as a pessimist, we're either going to come first or last. The race briefing, the organisers run through the route, the logistics. We look at some of the challenges and the key moments along the race route, what happens if things go wrong, how evacuation works. We talk about wildlife, but in fairness, the biggest risks to ourselves are us when we're tired, when we're hallucinating, when we're sleep deprived. So a lot of conversation, a lot of the presentation is around you and your teammate, because ultimately, as we know, that's where the strength comes from on this race. The river is looking great at the moment. It's flowing. It's not as high as last year, but it's higher than normal by the looks of things. So it's not running as fast, but it's still running well. But also being lower, it does mean that there's more opportunities to find safe places to camp each day. There's sandbars, there's islands that weren't there last year, and they do present an opportunity to find somewhere a little easier in those hours when we need to come in, because we have a mandatory stop of 6 hours. We must stop between the hours of 10 at night and midnight, so we have a 2-hour window to decide when to stop once we're happy we've found somewhere safe. Once we're happy, once we've checked for bear prints or animal prints or leftover carcasses of fish or any sign that we won't be alone in that place, once we make a call, we start our timer and we have 6 hours, and we cannot get back on the water for 6 hours. We can stay on there for 7 hours if we want, but 6 hours is the minimum. But you don't want to be staying on there for any more than 6. You know, this race is about being on that water as long as possible in that 18-hour period. So we've got our own little tricks up our sleeves. I say tricks up our sleeves, or we've got processes to minimise the need to have to stop at any time during the day. So the SUP briefing done. And then we have kit check this afternoon down in the park near the start line, where we have to effectively show the organisers all of the mandatory kit lists, make sure that they're happy there, show them our mapping, our GPS, make sure they're happy that we understand how to find ourselves on a map and how to translate our location information to either the emergency services or anyone that might need it. We do a satellite phone check to make sure the organisers are happy we know how to use it, and that we have the organiser's number and they have our satellite number. And we do the spot tracker check. So the spot tracker is the piece of kit, the GPS device that will be pinging every 10 minutes when we're paddling, and will be what anyone following the race will be able to see when they're following us on the race. The tracker goes live fairly soon, and it's quite interesting. You can follow us, see where we are, see key stats like our average moving pace, our estimated time of arrival at some of the key, I say checkpoints, they're not checkpoints, they're kind of milestones along the race. So that link will go live and then we can share that. So once the kit briefing's done, then it's a proper game face on. As Team Shac, our plan is to come back to our hotel. We've been here all week, so we know it very well. We've managed to get the hotel to give us the conference room for the afternoon, evening, so we can inflate our boards and load them up and check everything, do all our last minute checks, but in the comfort of a conference room, which is effectively about 20 metres from our hotel room. And we're out of the sunshine because it's really hot here today. We had a lot of rain yesterday. Today is, the sun is shining. It's going to probably hit 28, 29 this afternoon. But we can do our final kit checks, make sure that everything is tied down tightly, everything is ready to go, and then we'll leave that overnight in the conference room, and then tomorrow morning head down to the start line, probably 6 o'clock, 6:30 tomorrow morning, load the boards up on the water, ready for a 7:30 a.m. start. Weather forecast, obviously things can change, but at the moment it's not going to be as hot, it looks, as it was for the River Quest. It's still warm. And the further up we get into the flats, the warmer it gets. But the lake at the moment is looking like a little tailwind, which is ideal. But, who knows? It can change so quickly as well. And there's so many microclimates up there, and you just don't know what you're going to get. But at the moment, we're happy with everything. There's some cut-off times for the for everyone. But we have a cut-off time of the halfway cut-off time for us is we have to reach Dawson City, but on the 18th of July by 23:59, which effectively works out at 70 hours of paddling when you factor in our mandatory 6-hour stops. For the geeks of you, that means that we have to be averaging over that period a minimum of 10.21 kilometres an hour. What does that mean? Not much really, because the lake is going to be slow. The lake is, 50, 60 kilometres long, but then the river gets faster after. So you can't, it's good to have that number in mind, but you can't focus on that on a daily basis. You just basically need to be on the water for 18 hours, paddling as best as you can in a pace you think you can maintain for that period of time. So the cut-off, is the 18th of the 7th, 23:59. Once we go through Dawson, assuming we make that cut-off, which of course we will, we then, basically, it's a race to the finish. And the cut-off for the SUPs is the 23rd of July at 2000. So that's it. That gives us our goals there and what we're aiming for. We're Team Shac. We are Team 1 for the tracker. And the Renegade Moose Chasers, Kim and Martin, are Team 2 on the race tracker. So it should be pretty straightforward to see us. So, that's it now. It's getting close. And we can't wait. Little update on some of the other things going on in Whitehorse. Teams have been arriving. Unlike last year, we saw a lot of the teams around town quite a lot in the week beforehand, but there's been a lot of teams lying low. I think a lot of people haven't arrived until either last night or the night before. So it's not been as easy to catch up with potential race participants, but Whitehorse is a busy, thriving town, and people have been out doing kit checks, buying last-minute things. The canoes and kayaks, particularly where they hire them, have been obviously adapting the canoes and kayaks to suit them and their team. I think we're quite lucky on SUP boards, to be honest, that we don't have to worry about tweaking and all that kind of stuff, other than choosing your board, your fin and your paddle. Beyond that, it is what it is. But it's interesting seeing particularly kayak teams looking at steering pedals and play and what happens, and so they're doing all those at the moment, and they start on the Saturday. So that's an update from Whitehorse. It's now nearly 1:00, and I need to make my way down to the park, ready for the kit inspection.
One of the themes of the Yukon 1000 is the team. And it's something that we've discussed with all of our guests this season. And a race of this sort will really test relationships and potentially destroy them as well. But what's clear from a safety and a practical point of view is that the choice of teammate is the most important decision you can make. And back in episode 97, I discussed this with guest Bart De Zwart. And if you haven't yet listened to the full episode, I really recommend it, because in the world of SUP and ultra endurance, he is unquestionably the GOAT. And it was a huge thrill when I finally got to speak to him. And when I speak, I generally try and chat by video. And I was speaking to him on his boat, which had the most fantastic and distracting backdrop, because he was anchored up in the waters of the Caribbean and just off a beautiful tropical island. So just coming back to Yukon, we chatted to Ike France back in 2015, I think before you did the Yukon 1000. And he was your partner when you won it in 2018. And one of the key differences between the Quest and the 1000 is the distance, but you also have to complete it as a team. And I guess that brings its own challenges. Could you just talk about the format of that Yukon 1000 race and how you can develop a partnership in that extreme environment? Because basically you're doing 17, 18 hours of paddling per day, every day for 8 days. How do you manage to harmonise your relationship on something that extreme?
Yeah, I actually thought about that the last couple of days, because we have a friend paddling in the Yukon River Quest right now, and we told her to hook up with other paddlers just for our own mental strength and safety. But it's hard because if you want to paddle with someone, you basically do a commitment that you pedal together, but there's times when you think like, I'm way stronger. I want to pedal away, make sure that I'm going to finish in time. And there are times the other way around. And I normally don't like that feeling. I like to, when I feel good, I want to go. And when I'm not too good, I'll see how I manage. I might pedal with other people, but I still want to have the ability to stop or go faster if I want to, if you need a break, or go faster if you want to go faster. But with Ike, it was a little different because the race is like that. Everybody has to stick together. It's always two people in the team. And Ike was the ideal partner. And we made a few basic rules that we said that we're not going to, if one is not so strong, we're not going to pedal in front of him half a board length, which I normally don't like much because it gives the feeling to the other person that he's always a little too slow. We didn't do that. We said if one is not feeling good, either we tow in, which in the end we never did, or we're just gonna slow down and pedal together. We adapt to the slower pedaler, basically. And the basic task of putting up your tent and making food and things like that, we divided before we started, which worked out great. And we had a very similar speed. So in the end, it was a great partnership. It worked out perfectly, which wasn't the case for all teams we saw later.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, particularly in those later stages when the exhaustion takes over. You only had 6 hours, I think, which was sort of mandatory stopping time. So you had a lot to do during that period, get your tents up. Potentially there would be some hostile wildlife around there as well. Hopefully you didn't get any traces of bears when you were camping.
Yeah, we had traces of bears. Sometimes we even went to the beach to set up our tent and decided not to put up our tent there because there were too many tracks and too many fresh tracks. There was a team who actually saw tracks, went to another place, put up the tent where they didn't see any tracks. The next morning they woke up and there were a lot of tracks just around the tent.
Wow.
So they're like, ooh, they were here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of it, but it's not as dangerous as it sounds. As long as you keep the food away from your tent. And if you see kid bears, you
go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, you go somewhere else. So it's okay, but it makes it it's a new dimension in adventure and in racing because of it.
Okay, so that's Bart's experience of the Yukon, and when Bart talks, we listen. He's just an incredible athlete, and although some of his expeditions might have been a little sketchy, he comes to all of his trips with a huge amount of experience and time on the water, which means he's qualified to take risks that others can't. So this is a shorter episode, and while we're expecting to skip a week as we wait for the racers to arrive across the finish line, we'll continue to bring you updates from the race through Instagram, through Threads, which we're enjoying, and also through our email newsletter, which you can sign up to by going to supfmpodcast.com/list. And we've obviously talked a lot about the two remaining SUP teams in the race, but we also wanted to throw a shout out to all of the competitors this year across canoes and kayaks, wishing them all good luck. And there are some incredibly inspiring teams in there, Ashley and Gary of Team Target Azalea being one of them. Ashley's been doing a lot of media ahead of the race in the UK, and I challenge you to listen to his story with a dry eye. He's a truly inspirational man. I also wanted to pull out a particular mention for another British team we've been in contact with, which is Fortune Favours the Brave team. And Nick and Dan are a couple of incredible humans who are taking their canoe down the route too.
Morning, Simon. We're at the start line, 35 minutes to go. We've got a Timmy Hortons, we've got a breakfast wrap and a coffee. Nick's on his second Gatorade. It's beautiful here, beautiful temperature. We're just in sort of a t-shirt or long sleeve shirt, and just seen a lovely wild fox just pop past us. It's been an amazing experience so far, flying out via Seattle, and then we flew via Vancouver up to Whitehorse, and Whitehorse is just a wonderful, wonderful town. It's just really beautiful. The people are really nice, and especially everyone around the event. So there's lots of veterans who've come down to give us their top tips, and it's been really lovely. And we're set. We're just about to probably get called over by John for him to give us a few words, and we'll push off, and we've got 1,000 miles to go.
Sorry, that was just me finishing off some food. Final bit of home food, I guess. Yeah, I think Dan summed it up. It's nervous apprehension now, standing at the start line. Boat's packed, we've done all we can. Now just time to get on the water and leave it all out there. It's been an amazing journey, really, quite incredible. I was reflecting on it last night, for Dan and I over the last 3 years, and so it means a lot to be here today, with Dan, and to take this on together. So time to go get it done. Really, obviously grateful for all the families for supporting us. It's probably taken over in some way of our lives for a while. So certainly lots of love to Tiff and Amanda, Thomas, Lilia and Ella, Amelia, and for all their support, and we'll look forward to seeing them soon. But it's a phenomenal race, really nice feel about it. Lovely to be out here, and seeing the SUP guys go off yesterday, looks like they're already doing well and battling on. I think Dan and I paddleboard a lot actually at home, and it's probably most of the training we've been doing for this, because it's the only way we can sort of paddle, I guess, solo. But looking at it out here, I certainly wouldn't want to be taking it off in a paddleboard. So hats off to those guys, and hopefully we'll see them at some stage along the journey, but wishing them fair winds, which will be ever needed on their side. But yeah, the time is now, as they say. So we've raised a good bit of money supporting YPI and reduce our carbon, which was always the I suppose the driver behind this, doing it for a cause, but also the purposeful side of trying to crack on and do something positive and prove to ourselves and others and go immerse ourselves in the wilderness for a while. But yeah, here we go, race ready.
And just sort of follow on from that, there's a lot of this, and speaking to the veterans who've completed the race, or as we're looking at, it's really a challenge. And as my wife explains to my children, when they keep saying, "Daddy, you need to win," winning is completing. It's getting out into this amazing countryside and enjoying the digital detox that Nick and I both need, getting away from our mobile phones. Yeah, I would say we're nervous. We've hopefully got the mental resilience. We know it's going to hurt for the first 2 days because our paddling experience is very, very limited. We've done 5 hours this year, and we need to do 18 hours a day, so that's really going to test us. But we're quietly confident. We know each other pretty well. We know that we can mock each other. We know we're going to have some dark times, but it's all going to go well. Anyway, hope you get to follow us and speak when we get back in 8 days, inshallah.
And we'll share their Instagram in the show notes alongside a whole bunch of other useful Yukon 1000 race-related stuff. And before we go, we've got a final word from Craig, who's been an ever-present throughout this Yukon 1000 season. So no one more appropriate to leave you in the hands of. So good luck to everyone competing this year. Just like the paddlers, we will see you on the other side. But in the meantime, here's Craig.
So there we have it. Kit check complete. Both SUP teams sail through the kit inspection with John. In fact, I think John looked quite impressed at both teams and our kit setup, our equipment, and how it's all beautifully packed for paddleboards. I think actually we surprise a lot of people with doing a race such as this on paddleboards. Every time we bump into a kayak or canoe team and we tell them we're on SUPs, the look they give us is like, why would you want us? What? Why? How? What? They don't quite understand. Things like, how could you stand up for 18 hours a day? And all I can think about is how can you sit down for 18 hours a day? At least we can move around, we can stand up, sit down, stretch out on the board. And then people are like, where do you put all your kit? Well, I think we've proven that a SUP board is actually quite a great place to do an expedition on, and with some proper planning and great kit, there's a lot you can take in a very efficient way, which hopefully you'll see post-race with the videos and stills and stuff from the event. So both SUP teams, both from the UK, both in the Yukon 1000, totally pumped, ready to go. It's Thursday evening. The race starts tomorrow at 7:30 AM. This feels a little bit like waiting to go to the gallows. I wish we could just get going now. Thanks, Simon, for all your support, mate. It means a lot to all of us to know you guys are following along, and we can't wait to share the stories with you when we get back.